Welcome back to Coach Cove's B-Ball Breakdowns, and in today's video we will be going over some more predictions for next year's NBA season, including the winners of the 2024 MVP, Rookie of the Year, and Mr. Clutch Awards. But let's start by recapping last season just for a minute because the Kings had a pretty historic season last year. In 2022, they made that midseason deal for Domantas Sabonis and finished that year with a record of 30-52. But last season they got hot early on. They started to light that beam, and they finished the season with a record of 48-30. Now, an 18-game swing and a win-loss record is pretty much unheard of, especially in today's NBA. So what we're going to do to start today's video is take a look at 3 teams from each conference that I think could make a similar, significant jump next year. Just take a look at the Orlando Magic, who were the team in the East that made the biggest jump last season, and are now in a prime position to make a playoff push. They added 2 more lottery picks in Anthony Black and Jet Howard this year, and they have a really good recent history of turning those high picks into high-level talent. I think this Orlando team is poised to have success this year because their roster is loaded with plenty of young guys with a lot of potential, and this team is going to be held together by last year's Rookie of the Year and somebody who is quickly making a name for himself in this league, and that is Paolo Banchero. I'm really excited to see what kind of leap he takes in his second season, but as for the Magic, it just goes to show how much of a difference 2 years can make. When you build an organization from within, you can turn it around even if you're a mid-market franchise. In other words, the Magic did what they always do, which is use their draft stock and acquired good talent. That's why I think Orlando will improve again next year and make their way back to the playoffs for the first time in 3 seasons. And after 4 seasons of less than 25 wins, I'm hoping that the Detroit Pistons can at least make the play-in game this year and compete for a playoff spot, because there are people who are listening to this video right now who weren't even alive the last time the Pistons won a playoff game. It has been that long. You have to go all the way back to May 26th, 2008 to find the last time Detroit won a playoff game in the NBA. And on that date, their 4 most recent lottery draft picks, Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, and Usar Thompson, were all under the age of 8 years old. But I'm a huge fan of this current Piston roster. They brought in a new head coach in Monty Williams, and although I don't think they'll make it back to the playoffs, I do think they'll make a significant improvement in their win-loss record. Another team with a young and talented core group of guys is the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers just missed out on the playoffs last year, finishing 11th in the West with a record of 35-47, but they got a lot better this offseason. They added a big piece in Jarris Walker, who fell to them at number 7 in the draft, and I think he's somebody who's going to fit in really well playing alongside Miles Turner and Tyrese Halliburton, because he was one of my favorite prospects this year, and if you want to know more about him, you can go watch my mock draft video from back in May. I linked it in the description below. Indy made a decent jump last season, improving their record by 10 wins from the previous year, but like I said in my last video, I think the Pacers are a team who we could very well see in the playoffs this year. What I loved most about Indy's offseason was the fact they picked up Bruce Brown in free agency and signed the star Miami Hurricane and last year's ACC Player of the Year, Isaiah Wong, to a 2-way contract. They also traded for Obi Toppin, and realistically, anything short of making it to a play-in game should be considered a shortfall for them this season. One thing I know for sure is that if this team is going to win, it's going to start with Tyrese Halliburton. Now let's move over to the West and talk about the 3 teams who I think have a chance to really improve their record and make a jump this season. And the first team on this list is the Houston Rockets, who had a very, very tough year last year. I actually did some research on NBA teams' advanced stats from last season, and it turns out the Rockets had the 2nd worst overall net rating in the league. They had the lowest assist-to-turnover ratio at 1.38. They also had the worst effective field goal percentage in the league. They had the highest turnover rate at 16.2%. Miraculously, they led the league in offensive rebound percentage, but that probably had a lot to do with the number of shots they missed because they were second to last in true shooting percentage as well. It really can't get much worse than that. But the Rockets are fully revamped for this season. They hired 2 great vets who are going to go out and compete every night, and they brought in a brand new head coach in Ime Udoka as well. Much like the Magic and the Pistons, the Rockets have built this team almost entirely through the draft. They're also still holding on to KPJ, but honestly, I think the best medicine for this team right now is just more individual scoring firepower. And although I'm mostly looking for Jabari and Jalen to fill those roles, I do hope to see Cam Whitmore get a shot to show what he can do in this league as well. Regardless of who's putting the ball in the bucket, this is going to be a fun team to watch with Amon running the offense and a bunch of scorers up and down the lineup. And if this team was in the East, they would be competing for a playoff spot, no question about it. But with as strong as the West is this year, I just don't see a whole lot of room for improvement from the Rockets. And of course, we had to throw OKC in here because this is a team that has a chance not to just make a jump, but to actually compete with some of the top teams in the West next season. Personally, I think they have two of the league's most intriguing young stars in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Chet Holmgren, but there's also a bunch of guys on this roster that JJ Redick would call Alfreds, which are basically just the 5 through 9 guys who can step up in crunch time and who could probably be a very good scorer if they had the ball more, but they're wise enough to know that sacrificing some touches and giving up some glory will ultimately help the team reach its goal of winning. OKC definitely has some Alfreds, and once you throw Giddey and Holmgren in there, now you're talking about a team who's pretty damn scary come playoff time. It'll be interesting to see how the bottom half of that Western Conference playoff bracket shakes out at the end of next year, and I have OKC somewhere in that 4 to 8 range. And the final team who I think can make a really big jump next year is the San Antonio Wembies. Sorry, I meant to say the San Antonio Spurs. No, but for real, I think Wemby is going to help this team in a lot more ways than most people may initially think. Most importantly, as Draymond said, he's going to be a heck of a defensive presence.
Separate from anything else that he could do. Him as a rim protector.
Yeah.
Yep. If Wemby is as special as ESPN has been trying to say that he is, he may be able to have a special impact there in San Antonio because the Spurs do have pieces and they have a Hall of Fame coach in Greg Popovich. I believe that in today's NBA, and the Nuggets just showed us this past season, you need 7 or 8 pieces who can be effective with the ball in their hands and play both ends of the court. The Spurs have 5 first-round draft picks from each of the last 5 years, and they just re-signed Trey Jones, who could be your 6th man coming off the bench. Realistically, you're only 1 or 2 pieces away from having a playoff squad at this point, so give the Spurs a couple more years, and this will be a team to watch out for. So we're going to go straight from looking at my predictions for next year's most improved teams into my predictions for next year's most improved player. And we're breaking history with this first award because I'm going to give this award to Brandon Ingram of the New Orleans Pelicans, who I believe will become the first player to win the Most Improved Player award 2 times in their career, because the last time B.I. won this award, he set new career highs in all 5 of the major stat categories, and that was in 2020. I think that this season, even though he's coming off a year in which he just set another new career high in scoring, the 25-year-old will be able to break all of his career highs in the 5 major stat categories again. I have him averaging 28.2 points per game, 6.3 assists, 6.5 rebounds, and a steal and a block next season. Now let's move into my prediction for the Coach of the Year award, and this was probably the most difficult pick for me to make because we're in kind of an odd spot in the league right now. No one is really in an ideal position, and with 7 teams bringing a new head coach this year, there's definitely a lot of uncertainty surrounding this pick. But ultimately, I decided to give this award to the Bucks' brand new first-year head coach, Adrian Griffin, because he got what was probably the most sought-after coaching vacancy in the league this offseason. The Bucks are in a pretty good spot right now. The franchise has won a title within the last 5 years, they have a perennial MVP candidate, and they're loaded with talented guys who know how to win. If Griffin can put the Bucks at the top of the East, it's going to be tough not to give this award to the 49-year-old head coach who's in his very first career coaching job in the league. My pick for this year's 6th man of the year is a guy who really impressed me at the end of last season, and that is Rui Hachimura. The former Washington Wizard was traded to the Lakers at the deadline last season, where he averaged 10 points per game and started in 9 of their final 33 games. But in the playoffs, he really came alive, and with the King entering the twilight years of his career, I think the Hachimura might see a slight uptick in minutes, and with that, an uptick in production as well. I've got next year's 6th man averaging 14.2 points per game, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, and a half a steal and a half a block to go along with it. And now for my Defensive Player of the Year prediction, I have Evan Mobley winning this award because as the runner-up from last season, he is automatically going to be in the conversation again, if not the clear frontrunner from the very beginning. The former number 3 overall pick is heading into his 3rd season now with the Cavs, and he's always been a guy who's impressed me on the defensive end, but the way he moves across the lane is what really amazes me and what often catches guys sleeping. At 7 feet tall with a 7'4" wingspan, his frame is truly an intimidating force down low, but because of his quickness, he can pretty much guard 1 through 5. I think there's a lot of upside for Evan in the rest of his career. Now let's take a look at my prediction for the second ever Jerry West Clutch Player of the Year award, and I went with Jalen Brunson because I feel like there's nothing that phases this guy right now. In my last video, I spoke about the fact that I had some doubts about Julius Randle and his ability to lead a franchise like the New York Knicks, but Jalen really seems to have slid into that role out there in the Big Apple because when Randle was a shell of himself in the playoffs, it was Brunson who stepped up and led the Knicks to a first-round gentleman's sweep over Cleveland. I think that becoming the face of the Knicks may be a good thing for Brunson, and his confidence is going to be through the roof, and that's why I picked him for this award. Next up, we're going to take a look at the Rookie of the Year award. And this was another very difficult award for me to choose, not so much because of uncertainty, but more so because of my conviction that this year's rookie class has a ton of talent. But ultimately, I had to go with Chet Holmgren because of what I saw from him in the Summer League out in Vegas this year. I just think he's going to have more initial production than Wemby and Miller. Maybe not Scoot Henderson right off the bat, but where he's going to separate himself from those other top three candidates is going to be his production on both ends. There's also the fact that Chet is the only one in this group who's playing on a pretty surefire playoff squad, and although I think Wemby has the higher ceiling, Chet will have the bigger impact this year. And now, the moment you've really been waiting for. My prediction for the 2024 NBA MVP award goes to Jason Tatum. I think that Jason Tatum will be next year's MVP for a few reasons. First of all, every MVP has great teammates. Whether it's the Joker, Joel Embiid, from Giannis to Steph to LeBron, one commonality among all MVPs is that they have great teammates. And everyone knows that this Boston squad is one of the best teams in the league. Tatum is entering his sixth season playing alongside Jaylen Brown, and one thing Boston has been able to consistently do is surround their star player with talent. They brought in Derek White and Al Horford during the 2021 season, and they made a huge move this offseason to bring in Kristaps Porzingis. And that trade rolls right into my second point because, like I said in my last video, the amount of tension that Porzingis is going to require from defenses is going to create a lot of space on Boston's offense, and I believe make this year a cakewalk for Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Porzingis has been improving each year he's been in the league, and he had his most dominant scoring season last year. If he continues to improve, I think the firepower and versatility that he adds to Boston's offense tips the needle for Jason Tatum to win the MVP this year. That does it for today's video. We'll be back in a couple weeks with some USA basketball updates. But until then, thank you for watching, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, I ask that you please share it with someone else who loves basketball. And if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, do that as well.